Good evening. I'm so excited to continue with our conversation about literacy. And tonight we're going to focus on the conversational portions of literacy. So let's review really quick though. The 4 parts of literacy are reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And out of those 4 components, we're going to focus on these 2, listening and speaking. And just so you know, there needs to be a reciprocal balance between listening and speaking if we're going to really use all of our skills to develop literacy. And according to Carolyn Musselwhite, within listening and speaking, there are 4 components. The linguistic part, the language itself. There's the social interaction piece, because you can't speak and listen by yourself very effectively. So there's got to be at least one other person to interact with, which makes it a social event. Then there's operational, the actual ability to access that language. And then there's strategic, where it has to be fast and easy to use. So when we talk about listening and speaking, in order to get faster at it, in order to really be effective with it, we must rehearse, practice, model, and use that language with others, according to Carolyn Musselwhite. And if you think about it, when we're using alternative forms of speaking and listening, it's just like when we teach kids who are verbal when they're very young. We talk, and we model. And we share in that experience long before we expect them to actually speak. So we must do the same for people who are going to use an alternative means to listen and speak. The linguistic component, we must provide exposure. According to Carolyn Musselwhite, we have to provide them tons of experience. We must be showing them, or someone must be showing, narrating, and using their language system in order to focus on the salient features, the key components. You want to demonstrate the key concepts and vocabulary so that the person you are using the system with can increase their understanding of how this language is really meant and what those words and the system actually mean. Social, let's think about, really any activity can be turned into a social interaction. When you turn any activity into social interaction, whether it's eating pie, playing a game, cooking dinner, cleaning up, it can become a social interaction. And when we do these things together in a meaningful way, we build relationships that gain. And when we build those relationships, we have an emotional connection. And when we have those emotional connections, that gives us a perfect venue, a perfect avenue to provide meaningful language in that moment. Operational. When we think about the operational component, it's more than just physically being able to hit a button or pick up a picture or whatever the system is. It's also giving it cognitive access, giving it a way for the person to comprehend what those symbols are representing. So the system has to be a system that someone else understands so that they can model and use it in a meaningful way in moment-to-moment situations. And the strategic component, this is where the system has to be fast and efficient. Otherwise, no one's actually going to model it. And if you can't model it, how is it going to ever be understood? And how is it ever going to be effectively used? So those people who are, sorry about the typo with the extra S on there, skeptics or gatekeepers who tell us that, only certain people should have access to alternative means to speak or read or write. To those skeptics, I want to challenge you to think about that if you presented symbols daily, in the moment, in naturally occurring situations, that when you do that, that provides socially meaningful language. That way it becomes easy to use. And if you still are kind of skeptical, I want you to think about, start with a list of symbols for your student. I bet your student already knows at least 1 or 2. How many students do not recognize the McDonald's symbol? or the wrapper, at least, if they're, maybe visually impaired and, would only be able to access it, say, through touch or something. Whatever that symbol would be, there are plenty of students out there who would recognize a symbol that makes sense to them. If you've given them something and they get excited, show them something and they get like, no way, I am not doing that, because like they hate brushing their teeth, and every time you show them the toothbrush, they get really resistant because they don't like it. Those are symbols that they understand. So I want you to start with making a list of the things that the student consistently responds to. Those are symbols that student understands. And then start making a list of, say, maybe 10 more symbols that you want to teach and incorporate, and make them fun, make them interesting, and build them into a daily routine. So say toothbrushing is awful, but we're going to start pairing it with a song that's crazy and funny, and then we play the octopus game while we brush our teeth. Great. Another option might be, building in a CD. We're going to listen to music time. I'm going to give you the CD that we're going to put in the CD player. The symbols can be about anything. So thinking about that is a good way to start with the social interaction within the activity to build the symbolic comprehension. So in summary, let's talk about the two literacy components of two of the literacy components are listening and speaking that we're talking about tonight, which requires another person to share the topic with you. And when we build that topic or build these listening and speaking components into daily routines that have symbols, we make that meaningful, giving access to strategic language. I really appreciate you spending your time with me, and I hope that you find this information helpful and interesting and are willing to share it with others. Have a good night.